The story's very short and sweet, Mr. Casey said. It was one day down in Arklow, cold, bitter day, not long before the chief died, may God have mercy on him. He closed his eyes wearily and paused. Mr. Dedalus took a bone from his plate and tore some meat from it with his teeth, saying, "Before he was killed, you mean?" Mr. Casey opened his eyes, sighed, and went on. "It was down in Arklow one day. We were down there at a meeting, and after the meeting was over, we had to make our way to the railway station through the crowd. Such booing and bang, man, you never heard. They called us all the names in the world. Well, there was one old lady, and a drunken old harridan she was, surely, that paid all her attention to me. She kept dancing along beside me in the mud, bawling and screaming into my face. 'Priest Hunter, the Paris Funds, Mr. Fox, Kitty O'Shea.' 'And what did you do, John?' asked Mr. Dedalus. 'I let her bawl away,' said Mr. Casey. 'It was a cold day, and to keep up my heart, I had, saving your presence, ma'am, a quid of Tullamore in my mouth. Sure, I couldn't say a word, in any case, because my mouth was full of tobacco juice.' 'Well, John?' 'Well, I let her bawl away to her heart's content, Kitty O'Shea and the rest of it, till at last she called that lady a name that I won't sully this Christmas board, nor your ears, ma'am, nor my own lips, by repeating.' He paused. Mr. Dedalus, lifting his head from the bone, asked, 'And what did you do, John?' 'Do?' said Mr. Casey. 'She stuck her ugly old face up at me when she said it, and I had my mouth full of tobacco juice. I bent down to her and says I to her, like that.' He turned aside and made the act of spitting. Says I to her, like that, right into her eye. He clapped his hand to his eye and gave a hoarse scream of pain. 'Oh, Jesus, Mary and Joseph,' says she, 'I'm blinded and drowned.' He stopped in a fit of coughing and laughter, repeating, 'I'm blinded entirely.' Mr. Dedalus laughed loudly and lay back in his chair, while Uncle Charles swayed his head to and fro. Dante looked terribly angry and repeated while they laughed, 'Very nice, very nice.' It was not nice about the spit in the woman's eye. But what was the name the woman had called Kitty O'Shea that Mr. Casey would not repeat? He thought of Mr. Casey walking through the crowds of people and making speeches from a wagonette. That was what he had been imprisoned for. And he remembered that one night Sergeant O'Neill had come to the house and had stood in the hall talking in a low voice with his father and chewing nervously at the chin strap of his cap. That night Mr. Casey had not gone to Dublin by train, but a car had come to the door, and he'd heard his father say something about the Cabinteely Road. He was for Ireland and Parnell, and so was his father, and so was Dante too. For one night, at the band on the Esplanade, she had hit a gentleman on the head with her umbrella because he had taken off his hat when the band played God Save the Queen at the end. Mr. Dedalus gave a snort of contempt. "Ah, John," he said, "it's true for them. We are an unfortunate priest-ridden race, and always were and always will be till the end of the chapter." Uncle Charles shook his head, saying, "A bad business, a bad business." Mr. Dedalus repeated, "A priest-ridden, God-forsaken race." He pointed to the portrait of his grandfather on the wall to his right. "Do you see that old chap up there, John?" he said. "He was a good Irishman when there was no money in the job. He was condemned to death as a white boy, but he had a saying about our clerical friends that he would never let one of them put his 2 feet under his mahogany." Dante broke in angrily. "If we are a priest-ridden race, we ought to be proud of it. They are the apple of God's eye. Touch them not, said Christ, for they are the apple of my eye." "And can we not love our country, then?" asked Mr. Casey. "Are we not to follow the man that was born to lead us?" "A traitor to his country," replied Dante. "A traitor, an adulterer. The priests were right to abandon him. The priests were always the true friends of Ireland." "Were they faith?" said Mr. Casey. He threw his fist on the table and, frowning angrily, protruded one finger after another. "Didn't the bishops of Ireland betray us in the time of the Union, when Bishop Lanigan presented an address of loyalty to the Marquis Cornwallis? Didn't the bishops and priests sell the aspirations of their country in 1829 in return for Catholic emancipation? Didn't they denounce the Fenian movement from the pulpit and in the confession box? And didn't they dishonour the ashes of Terence Bellew McManus?" His face was glowing with anger, and Stephen felt the glow rise to his own cheek as the spoken words thrilled him. Mr. Dedalus uttered a guffaw of coarse scorn. "Oh, by God," he cried, "I forgot little old Paul Cullen. Another apple of God's eye." Dante bent across the table and cried to Mr. Casey, "Right, right! They were always right! God and morality and religion come first!" Mrs. Dedalus, seeing her excitement, said to her, "Mrs. Reardon, don't excite yourself answering them. God and religion before